Doing good. This is Evening Skews. As always, we begin with our dumbass report. And now this one tonight requires a little bit of a personal disclaimer from me, I think, because it's important that y'all know that many of the things featured in tonight's dumbass report, I am generally speaking a big fan of. Things like college football, the state of Louisiana, the person Ed Orgeron, or at least the coach Ed Orgeron. In the macro sense, I'm fans of these things typically, but still, the honor is bestowed where the honor is bestowed. And for those of you who missed it, a couple days ago, Coach Ed Orgeron of the reigning national champions of college football, Louisiana State University's Tigers, said in a teleconference that most, not all, but most of his team has contracted COVID-19. Now, as far as I can find, there's not a good there's not a good clip of this out there because it was in a teleconference, so I can't play a clip for you guys, so I'm forced to just give you my best approximation of this exchange and how it went down. So here it goes. We're in a press conference. Coach O, could you talk a little bit about the state of the program in the time of COVID and the regulations that are a result of the pandemic and how it's affected you as a team and an organization and a family?
Yeah, so most of the kids, not all the kids, but most of the kids, they got the Rona, but they're doing good. They've rebounded. They're doing good, and except for two or three of the big boys up front, they're on the mend, and we think that they're not going to catch it again, and most importantly, they're not going to miss any of our ball games this fall. Go Tigers! Next question.
That last part, Mark, was an actual quote. He said the most important thing, they're not going to miss any of the ball games this fall.
That is the most important thing, Trey. It really is. We're all living and dying. I mean, like you gotta be happy for these kids that all their medical decisions and information are being given out and decided by a guy who talks like a cartoon alligator. Which, if you guys aren't familiar with Ed Orgeron, he's a character, and it's usually a fun one. But he's like, yes. These dudes really do live and breathe football. I think it's the most important thing in the world. It's their whole life. It's made them rich, and it's made them kings of the little towns they live in. If you've been to Baton Rouge, I mean, unless you want to drink and drive at 10 in the morning, ain't a lot else going on. So you got a bunch of industrial oil plants and LSU football, baby.
So. Baton Rouge. But no, I mean, I know he was just answering the questions, and he was saying, like, we expect to have them all back by the time the games start, but I still feel like in the context of the question, what they were talking about, it comes across as like that scene from Not Another Teen movie or whatever, where one of the football players gets ripped in half and the head coach is like, can he play? Can he? It's like, Coach, he can't walk. He's not even a whole person. Can he play? And
it's not even like
the Tigers will be able to play.
For whatever reason, sometimes like sports makes all this stuff really clear. Like it's the clearest examples of shit that's fucked up about our planet. But for the past 6 months, we got to go back to work, right? Work, which is a very American thing. We got to work. These kids aren't getting paid. It's not their job. Right. And so it's just like, no, these kids have to go back to work so Ed Orgeron can make money. I'm sure it's not how he sees it, but it's basically what it is. And,
well, there's plenty of programs that this doesn't apply to that are playing college football this fall. But I think that like a lot of the players, for a program like LSU, you're right, they don't get paid, but they still like look at it as a job. Do you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of those guys are hoping to get drafted or whatever. Like, that's a really high level, and so they probably approach it like a job. I would imagine
a third to half the starters are going to play on Sundays, probably. And at some point, I get that, but they also that doesn't necessarily simplify the decision making, because some of them got to play to make the pros, but other ones are like, I'm getting drafted anyway. If I get COVID. Maybe I have a heart defect that makes me drop 4 rounds. So I don't know. I don't know how you do that calculus.
And also, I should also say, like I said, I've talked about before on the show, I'm a huge college football fan. I'm from Tennessee. I'm a Vols fan. It's been hell on earth for a long time now, but I was born to it. And should also
Yeah,
say,
maybe you should be upfront about your biases here, man. Pretty much LSU, Auburn, Clemson, Carol Baskins, Tigers do not hit for Trey at all. They've been ruining his life for decades.
Don't hit for me. LSU. I used to go to a lot of Tennessee games when I lived in Knoxville, and I will say the most fun I had with an opposing fan base was with LSU fans because they were walking around to different tailgates, like giving people boo down and shit, like just a bunch of drunk Cajuns having a good time, and it was fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, all I want to say is this is not specific to just the LSU Tigers because last week would have been the first game for the Tennessee Vols, but they changed the schedule because of COVID months ago. But it came out that had they not changed the schedule and they'd had their first game this past Saturday, Tennessee would not have been able to play in it because of the amount of players that were on the COVID list. They wouldn't have been able to field a team, or if they were, only barely. So it's not just the LSU thing. So it seems like it's so weird to me because I see these like multiple reports from SEC teams about how they've been ravaged by the COVID regulations, but yet other conferences, other schools have been playing college football games for like 2 or 3 weeks now. And also the NFL just came back this past weekend and it was a big story for them Sunday morning. Not one single player or coach in the NFL tested positive for COVID. Not a single one of them. When you put them all together, that's like, I don't know, more than 2,000. It's a couple thousand people, and nobody tested positive for it. But yet, these SEC college programs, like I said, have been just ravaged by it. It's like, most of our players, over half of our players, have caught it already. And that, I'm not trying to be like conspiracy theory-y, but that seems weird to me. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
I do think, I think there's several possibilities, and I think it's true. There's probably somewhere in the middle. Like some football beat writer was suggesting her conspiracy theory was that they're using the European standard for testing, where you have to have a higher viral load in order to test positive, which would enable them to juke the stats a little bit. But also like the kids don't have the financial incentive to stay clean because like the NFL players, if you don't follow sports closely, their contracts aren't guaranteed, so they can literally be cut, I think, up until game 4 and not be guaranteed the full season contract. So they have financial incentive to stick to the rules and to wear masks and all that stuff. The college players, they have to do a bunch of other activities that they're required to do to be able to play that are outside of football. They literally have to go be around other students. They have to go to like they can only eat at the dining hall because boosters can't buy them sandwiches. They have to go to class, right? They have to pass. I mean, we all know there are workarounds, but in general, they have to go through the routines of looking like students, even though we all know tutors are doing a lot of their homework. But NFL players can avoid a lot of that stuff, even though what the Seahawks dude got caught sneaking a girl into his hotel room and got cut for it.
Yeah, again, he got cut, right. He got cut immediately, but that guy was like an undrafted free agent or like a late round draft pick or something. If it was Russell Wilson, he wouldn't be in trouble. But also Russell Wilson is like, he has a $35 million a year contract because he's insanely committed to football to begin with. So he's like, he stays at home with, what's his wife's name? Ciara, right?
Ciara, yeah. So, pop singer. So like and also like was going to say I had a point. I don't know. It wasn't. That must have not been that good.
All right. Well, so the last thing we'll say about football before moving on, I mentioned that the NFL came back this week, and coronavirus wasn't the only socio-political agenda for the NFL. Social justice also a huge thing, as it is in all major sports leagues right now. The NFL came back this week, and there you saw a bunch of different ways of protesting or making a statement for social justice or for unity or whatever. Some teams had players stay in the locker room for the national anthem. They didn't come out. Some of them came out and took a knee, like in Colin Kaepernick style. Some of them, some players took a knee, other players didn't, but they all like locked arms or held shoulder pads or something to show that they were all together in their statement or whatnot. They did a bunch of things like that. And I'm for all of that, but a couple of things I wanted to talk about it. First thing is the NFL, the official NFL Twitter social media pages for the NFL took a lot of those screenshots from that happening and posted it and was like, the NFL is proud to support the players in their quest for social justice or whatever. And like, again, I'm a huge football fan. That just seems like bullshit to me when, you know, where was the NFL when Colin Kaepernick started this shit a few years ago? You know what I mean? It was a completely different story now. But now in 2020, and like, I don't know, I also, because I'm from the South and everything, I don't want to be the type to demonize changing for the positive. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather have the NFL come around to be on the right side of things than them not. But still, it just like kind of feels like bullshit to me.
It's all corporate branded bullshit, but it is better for them to pretend to be on the right side of stuff than to pretend to be on the wrong side of stuff. So it's like the hypocrisy is a tribute vice pays to virtue kind of stuff. But some of it's a little gross. Like they were using Kaepernick in their commercials, which is like you're still blackballing the dude, but pretending like you support him. Right. And there is, of course, going to be a point where Colin Kaepernick is just too old to play in the NFL, and we're probably rapidly approaching that. But he would have been. It's fairly inarguable that when they started blackballing him, he would have been a very good backup, if not a bottom end.
No, without a doubt, he would have been like. I don't care how you fit, because I'm a huge football fan. I watched it for years. I don't care how you appraise Kaepernick as a player. To me, it's objective that at the very worst, he would have been an upper tier backup in the NFL at that time, and he wasn't for a reason, and that reason is pretty clear to everybody. He got blackballed for taking a stand by taking a knee, but
and they have and by the way, like if they were just honest about it, I could at least respect it. But like, look, we have a deeply conservative fan base who's annoyed by this stuff, and we can't sign him. At least that would have been honest, as opposed to lie and say he's not good at football. Like, I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan, and like if they had Jerry Jones just said, like, look, we're in Texas, and he'll get booed every time he's on the field, even if he throws a touchdown every single snap. So we just can't sign him. Okay. It would just be honest, you know.
So speaking of that was the other thing I was going to bring up with football before we move on. They had all these displays of unity. The very first game of the NFL season was Thursday Night Football last Thursday between the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans, and they, as two teams, agreed upon a display of unity. They didn't take a knee or anything like that. They locked arms at midfield, both teams, as a display of unity. And when they did that, and you could hear it on the broadcast, they were booed loudly by the crowd in attendance. But it's very important to note, in my opinion, almost every stadium in the NFL doesn't have any fans present because of COVID. Only a few do. And one of them is Arrowhead in Kansas City, Missouri. They're allowed to have fans there. But it was only like a fraction of
20,000, I think.
Like spread out all across the stadium. And in my opinion, there's definitely a little bit of confirmation bias going on there, where you think of the people who are most likely to ignore a pandemic and go to a football game. They are the Venn diagram of those people and the people who are most likely to boo a unity display overlaps a shit ton. So I don't think it's that surprising, but it still was pretty painful to see happen.
I mean, this is good. This should not be construed as a defense of these people, but one thing I'll say that I find fascinating about modern American culture is like, people rarely say what they mean, so we're all conditioned to hear the meaning behind the things people aren't saying, right? We communicate in memes in America now because people are just so afraid of actually being honest. So everybody understood what the NFL was doing. They were doing a half-ass co-opting of Black Lives Matter movement and trying to take the teeth out of it to keep the players happy enough to keep playing while not offending the fans, right? So that the players do this arms locking moment of unity thing, which is like, that lets JJ Watt feel okay being at the center as a team captain for this protest, because he can tell himself it's not a Black Lives Matter protest because he's Mr. Captain America. But the black players can feel like they're actually doing something, and they try to split that line just fine. But the fans know exactly what's happening is the NFL is pandering. So honestly, you could boo it from either direction. But they're definitely booing it from the right wing direction there, because they know what the NFL is meaning, even though it's not what they're saying.
Okay, you know? All right.
Because I mean, there's no one to boo unity. It's a greeting card.
But I think And I mean, I think we're saying different versions of the same thing, given the people who are booing it. But that was my big takeaway from it. And a lot of people, it's obvious, like, it was never about the kneeling or the disrespecting the anthem in the first place. Do you know what I mean? It was about what's behind it. But, like, what's behind it is saying that systemic racism is a problem in America. And any way you go, because at the time they were like, before the kneeling, and this has all been said a million times, but before the kneeling, there was Ferguson and all that, and these same people were saying, it's fine for black people to protest, but there's a right way to do it, and that ain't the right way. And then they start peacefully kneeling, and it's like, well, that ain't it either. And then they come out in Kansas City and just don't kneel. They lock arms in a display of unity. Who boos unity? But these same people are like, no, we know what you mean. That ain't it either. So like, there's no way that there's no way to go about it that will appease those people, in my opinion. So, like, why try? Like, do your thing. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Just say Black Lives Matter, screw cops.
Right.
They're going to boo the same no matter what.
Right.
Because it's just like, why even do the half-ass thing? Because everyone knows, everyone's been through PR, the same PR school. We all know what you're saying, what you're not saying, right? So just say it. And yeah. Oh, I forgot. I remember my COVID point. This relates to that. My anti-conspiracy theory point with the COVID test was if it got out that a team was covering up positive tests and risking their players' safety, it would be a pretty huge scandal in this environment. And the players are already on the verge of, it feels like, pushing for an actual union instead of the bullshit players association, and striking for better working conditions and more respect and more guaranteed contracts, which the NFL would rather die than see. So my point to all this is, to me, that's in COVID related. I don't think the NFL would trouble themselves with trying to hide COVID, because it could lead to a disaster of much more biblical proportions to their bottom lines. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we will move on from football to many of your approval, I'm assuming, but still sticking with dumb shit. So, I got another disclaimer for this one. We're, of course, going to talk about Trump for a little bit. Mark, you and I live in California. Trump's visited California, and weirdly, that's led to a lot of dumbass sound bites. Now, before we play some of them, my stance on these is, I'm going to make it clear up top, I don't know shit about forestry, okay? I don't. But these things are
I've gotten lost in the woods quite a few times. Yeah.
These things are objectively funny in how they play, okay? So here's one of them for you. This is Trump talking about the situation in California and on the West Coast with the wildfires.
When trees fall down after a short period of time, about 18 months, they become very dry. They become really like a matchstick. Mm-hmm. And they, there's no more water pouring through, and they become very, very, they just explode. They can explode. Also leaves. When you have years of leaves. Leaves on the ground, it just sets it up. It's really a fuel for a fire. So they have to do something about it.
Okay. Now,
it's funny, like the stuff his brain gets stuck on, because the leaves thing,
exactly.
He got made fun of a couple years ago for talking about how we have bad wildfires, because European countries don't have these wildfires because they rake the forests and everybody roasts them for it. So
don't have the wildfires because they rake the forest, and like you said, he gets hung up on certain factoids that he gets in his briefings and whatnot. And so,
but I'm saying he's still mad about being made fun of for it. So he's still trying to prove himself right from being roasted by late night hosts 26 months ago. Yeah.
Here's another soundbite. It's from, apparently he's going to be a weekly participant on Fox and Friends. I don't know why that took this long, but here we are. And here's some more of his thoughts on the wildfires.
Well, look, Ryan, you have all over the world. You don't have fires in California. In Europe, they have forest cities.
Australia.
You look at
How about Australia?
Countries, Austria. You look at so many countries. They live in the forest. They're considered forest cities. So many of them.
Forest cities.
And they don't have fires like this.
They're
and they
elves.
have explosive trees.
They're elves in Austria.
They have trees that will catch
explosive trees
easier.
Too.
But they maintain their fire. They have an expression. They thin the fuel. The fuel is what's on the ground. The leaves.
They live in forest cities in these countries in Europe. They're forest people, like you said. They're elves, they're ants. They are forest people over there, and they don't have these fires. Now, my argument would be like, well, of course they don't. You would expect forest people to be better at, maintaining forest fires than we have beach people. We are beach people in California. Those are forest people over there. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Obviously, I'm just fucking around. I don't know what the fuck this is all about. Like he just keep. Someone told him, I know that certain types of trees in the middle of a raging wildfire can explode, right? But like he heard that in a meeting and is now talking about, he just keeps bringing up exploding trees and how explosive California's trees are versus Austria's, where they have all the forest cities and they have even more explosive trees, but yet they're not exploding. And it's like, what the fuck even is all of this?
Yeah, what was that? What was the place where the hobbits lived in Lord of the Rings?
The
What was it called?
Shire.
The Shire, yeah.
The
Austria's the
Shire.
Shire.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like where to start with this, because let's start in a universe where he's right, where like Austria doesn't have these fires because they have an amazing forest service or whatever. Can we taxes to pay for a better forest service? Can we do that? Because like if that is a solution, let's try it. I don't know.
Well, a lot of I don't have the exact number, but a whole lot of the forest area that's covered in the state of California is federal land covered by the Bureau of Land Management or the U.S. Forest Service or whatever. So, what's going on there? Is that part of it not burning versus the part that the, liberal commie state has control of or whatever? And
Yeah,
he never brings up, I mean, of course he doesn't, but like, never brings climate change at any point. Like, again, I think behind all this wacky shit he's saying, there are kernels of truth to a lot of it. Like, of course, if you have a forest floor covered with a bunch of kindling and tinder and dry, fallen trees and leaves and stuff, that's a fire hazard. Like, I mean, of course that is true, but the larger problem clearly is climate change at a macro scale, but that never gets brought up. It's just blamed on the liberal state and the mismanagement of the forest or whatever, and that's the thing that makes it bullshit.
But they have mismanaged it. Like the land use policies aren't great, and but it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't change the fact that the planet's getting hotter, and that's why. Like you and I were talking about before we went live, that the global warming has shrunk the window where you can do controlled burns. And then this year, because of budget cuts having to do with COVID and lack of resources, they did way less controlled burns, even with what they could have done within that small window. So now, now we're living with that. Like everything spirals; it's all connected. And I don't understand why making this isn't really a partisan issue. Like the hollowing out of American, infrastructure and agencies and resources is been by a bipartisan consensus for 30 years, and so.
But you do know why it's a partisan issue. I mean, he's been upfront about it the whole time. It's because the states that are affected by this, California, Oregon, Washington, are states that don't like him. They're blue states that are not Trump fans, and that's why, they have to be admonished as opposed to being assisted in a time of crisis or whatever. And he literally just basically comes right out and says that shit,
It's also just really stupid because the parts that are burning of Washington and Oregon are
right.
One of the reasons Portland's so hated in larger Oregon is because it's like Austin in Texas. It's an extremely blue little dot in a sea of red, and it controls the state's politics because it's highly populated and has more votes. So like the areas that are burning are his, for broadly speaking, a lot of his supporters, but he doesn't care because it won't win the election, and I don't know what to do about it. I mean, it's a really stupid way to look at governing because, again, public service, you're supposed to care about all of us. You're supposed to care if me and you get murdered, even though we're not vote for him. It's just I don't know. But speaking of the partisan issue, and by the way, Republicans are the only major party in the world that in general disbelieves in climate change. But do you have the clip of him talking about science, how he knows better than science?
Yeah. Hang on just a second. So, yeah, this is from this. A lot of these are from the same. Actually, no, this is a different one. Hang on, I'm pulling it up here. How's that?
I didn't mean to throw you off by stage directing. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, it's all right. We got it. You're talking about science not knowing shit, basically.
There is amazing partnership on the ground, and there needs to be. As the governor said, we've had temperatures explode this summer. You may have learned that we broke a world record in the Death Valley, 130 degrees. But even in greater LA, 120 plus degrees. And we're seeing this warming trend make our summers warmer, but also our winters warmer as well. So I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests, and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key. Because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting California.
Okay. It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually. Tom?
So,
All right.
yeah, like I mean, what do you? I mean, that's exactly what he said about COVID early on. That was the big story last week with Woodward's book and everything. You know, because he was coming out saying about COVID, like, it'll go away, it'll disappear. That's what happens. It will disappear. But then he was getting on the phone with Woodward in private and saying, like, oh yeah, this is a huge problem. And I just can't help but wonder now, if as dumb as I've always thought he is, I can't help but wonder now if that it's same kind of thing with this. If he's like behind closed doors, he's like, oh yeah, the planet's fucked and it's because of us, but you know, what are you gonna do? Got an election to win.
I mean, this isn't just Trump as a huge problem among our entire like leadership class about how much they think like it's like the power of like positive thinking impacts everything. Like we basically elected the secret president. Two of the last three presidents were like we elected the book The Secret. Just like if you just don't put out global warming or COVID vibes out in the universe, then it won't be true, and we can all make it go away. It's just asinine bullshit, and I hate it so much. I really hate it. But science doesn't know, Trey. Science doesn't know. I'm like,
well,
yeah.
in keeping with science not knowing, there's another big story from this weekend. There were a couple stories having to do with coups. Prominent Republican figureheads or spokespeople basically calling for straight up coups, and one of them was the spokesperson for the Department of Health and Human Services, Michael Caputo, and who lost his mind on his own Facebook page. He went live on Facebook, and you know, far be it from me to criticize a man for making that decision to go live on Facebook. but in his case, it seems to have been a bad idea, because Michael Caputo, the spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, went live on his personal Facebook page this weekend and said a lot of wild shit. But a lot of it had to do with the attack on science, because the Health and Human Services, part of what's under their umbrella is the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And Caputo last week had come under fire for trying to revise and alter or block the CDC's COVID reports because they looked bad for Trump. That had already happened. And then this weekend he got on his Facebook and went nuts and was talking about how there are scientists at the CDC who don't want America to get well until Joe Biden is president. That they're gaming the system, they're rigging the numbers, and they're actively trying to keep the COVID pandemic from getting better until Donald Trump is out of office. And he's talking about the scientists at the CDC, who most of which are career scientists, have been there through many different administrations, from Bush to Obama to Trump or whatever. And that's just the tip of the iceberg and the crazy shit this motherfucker said.
Yeah, and now he's said he's taking a leave for mental health, right? He needs a
yeah. Also, I mean, I guess I don't know. Like, I don't want to give him any kind of like leeway, really, because of the severity of the shit he was saying. But at one point, he did say early on, and he straight up said that his own quote mental health has definitely failed. but he talked about laying alone in his apartment in D.C. and seeing shadows on the ceiling and all of this. And he said to the audience, "You're not waking up every morning and talking about dead Americans." And now listen, all of that I sympathize with. A person going through all of that, like, that's horrible, and that has an effect on you. But then where he took it from there to villainize these scientists is not just that. He also talked about like Antifa hit squads. He said there are hit squads being trained all over this country. You understand they're going to have to kill me, and unfortunately, I think that's where this is going. And he talked about like the coming civil war, basically, and all those Antifa buses and shit that were coming out, and just all the like, just checking all the right-wing conspiracy boxes right now. And the thing, like, this guy is not only a high-level Trump administration official, he's a public relations, he's a PR specialist. Like, his whole thing is messaging and spin and all of that, and he's on here just going full Alex Jones, full QAnon shit live on social media, and like, that's where we're at right now, is this type of thing. It's fucking crazy.
He's been an asshole for a long time before he worked for Trump. Yes. So I don't want to I don't give him too much the benefit of the doubt. But also, like, it's like he alleged there were like paramilitary squads within the CDC, which I don't know how like these disease nerds got time to train up in parkour and like Jason Bourne weapons handling. But it's just, I don't understand how we get this divorce from reality, and how you can be this high up in government and you know, and keep your job after being this crazy. It's bizarre. I don't know. Society's tearing itself apart, and the people at the top are leaning into it. It's very weird.
Yeah, even after this happened, after he did this on Facebook, he then went to Twitter, and on Twitter he was like commenting on like posts from there was a post from a journalist who had a video saying they were about to be tear gassed by police at a protest, and he was commenting, gas all of them, and just going in on all these, you know, different liberal. He was like picking out random commenters who were opposed to him and saying like, "Hey, douchebag, you have 4 followers," and just like flexing his fucking social media dick on there, just all.
You're the spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services, man. You're dunking on people on their follower account.
For the Department of Health and Human Services is calling Twitter trolls douchebags.
You and I had a talk last week about the content for this show, and we were talking about how like there's a lot more fun stuff we could do, but we feel the need to be responsible and not accidentally spread misinformation or like bad spin.
Right.
We're two people who work in fucking comedy on a goddamn Facebook show. Yep. Meanwhile, the spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services, salary paid for by taxpayers, who's supposed to communicate information about health to the public, is just ranting about goddamn. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know how to.
No. You know what? Since you brought it up, I guess I'll just jerk us off for a minute. But you really are onto something with that, I think, because you're right. The last episode we did, we talked about before the show. We talked about bringing up the Sturgis rally from last week and how dumb that was, and it was a super spreader event and all that. But we ultimately decided not to bring it up because there were a lot of conflicting reports about the degree to which it actually exacerbated the pandemic, and like, it was, at the very least, it was cloudy. Like of course, generally speaking, it's a bad idea to go to a biker rally in the middle of a pandemic. But we weren't comfortable with spouting these statistics about the billions of dollars of damage and the hundreds of thousands of cases it caused and whatever else, because the statistics were dubious, right?
Yeah.
And so we didn't talk about it. We didn't bring it up. And like you said, we're two fucking comedy jackoffs with a internet show, you know, and we don't want to do that. This dude is the spokesperson for the Department of Health and Human Services, and he's not the only one at all. Another big story from the past few days, obviously, he doesn't currently hold a major position in the Trump administration, but everybody knows he's extremely close to the Trump administration. Roger Stone went on Alex Jones's show. I can barely even say this shit with a straight face, but it's true, right? So, longtime Donald Trump confidant and strategist Roger Stone went on Alex Jones's InfoWars program and there again said a bunch of crazy shit, among which he said the president should declare martial law to seize power if he loses the election. And Stone was saying he probably will lose the election. But if he does, he should declare martial law and seize power and refuse to step down because, in Stone's opinion, clearly the integrity of the election has been compromised. So, like, this shit scares me so much that I, like, hesitate to even... It worries me playing too much of a part in even sort of like building this narrative just because of how terrified I am of it. But it seems like they're starting to they're starting to put it out there, you know, that no matter what happens, it's going to be some shit, which is what we've all been worried about this whole time. But now they are actively talking about it because Bill Barr also was talking about, he didn't go so far as saying any election results will be compromised and Trump should declare martial law, but he was calling into question any hypothetical results from a vote by mail election. You know, like they're planting the seeds for people to just immediately call bullshit on Joe Biden winning. And when that happens, after that, fucking all hell breaks loose.
Well, I mean, here's to me we game out what could happen, what couldn't happen. I don't think declaring martial law, I'm not even sure Trump will be able to figure out how to do that and what would follow next. It would, and plus, like you're to make that plan work, you're relying on a bunch of career bureaucrats who, even if they might sympathize with Trump, they need to risk going to prison for life to pass on orders to do stuff that they know is plainly illegal and unconstitutional. And I don't think I think you're going to see a bunch of people shrugging and like trying to look busy and not doing anything if he even tries that, which him declaring martial law would mean tweeting about it. Right. But there'd be other people that have to figure out how to do the follow through. I don't think they would. To me, the bigger concern is on election day and the lead up to it, a bunch of like private right wingers, like Stone was the guy who organized the Brooks Brothers riots in Florida in 2000, which Brett Kavanaugh was a foot soldier in, where a bunch of college Republicans and Republican activists got bused into Florida to just physically stop vote counting by walking in massive loud protests. Now, I can conceive of there being a bunch of stuff like that happening on election day and during mail ballot counting, right? To me, that's the bigger concern, that would throw doubt on the election results as opposed to official government action doing anything. So that's the stuff I'd be worried about. But to me, the bigger takeaway is that like a political party that 40% of Americans support, 40 to 45, has just gone completely fucking insane and is now pro-authoritarian and anti-democracy. Right. And that's going to be around. It has been around for a while, and it's going to be around a long time after Trump's heart clogs up on the toilet.
Right, like they're pretty much like calling for him to declare himself dictator, and like you said, 40-ish% of Americans, that maybe 35 to 40, whatever percent of Americans are completely on board for that, and most. It's fucking insane. So, Mark, keeping with the disinformation, tell us about the...
Trey, still there? Did I lose you or you lose me? All right. Well, I can't tell if I'm still live or Trey's not. Okay. So, anyway, Oregon.
All right.
Ah,
I think we're back. Are you there? Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
Hopefully it won't split it up. I don't know what happened. We lost the connection. I'm sorry. Hopefully it won't split it into two things, but that's the first time that's ever happened. I think we're back now. God damn it. Okay. Anyway, I was saying, Mark, we're talking about
Oregon.
disinformation. Yeah. Oregon, Antifa. Tell us about
So
that.
there's been a bunch of viral stories on spreading on Facebook and Twitter and the normal disinformation channels about like all the fires in Oregon and Washington being started by Antifa. Now, the core of this is a couple different things happened sparked this, but like for example, people heard BLM on the police scanners and talking about fires and took it to mean Black Lives Matter when they meant Bureau of Land
Bureau of
Management.
Land Management. Yeah. Right.
And that's sort of a big cultural divide. That's one of the things that so right wing Americans in the western half of the country have been primed to hate things with the initials BLM
Right.
for decades. Right, that the Bundy's big beef is with the Bureau of Land Management. That's who they had the guns drawn standoff with over the taxes they pay to feed their cows. If I think if people had known, maybe they would have picked a different name for the Black Lives Matter movement. They would have had a different acronym, and maybe it would be probably would have been clear marketing. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Who cares? So people heard that and started this wave of stories, and a couple police were spreading them, doing viral videos on Facebook to police groups. There's been no evidence of any sort of, there'd be no political reason to start these fires. I can't even think of what it would be. People are blaming the Governor Kate Brown for backing it because she couldn't get federal funds to rebuild Portland after the riots. So now, of course, this is a trick to get federal funds, which is like you get federal funds, but you have to spend way more money. It doesn't seem like a good plan. People are refusing to leave their houses because they think the fires are a scam, so Antifa can come loot their property. So people are probably going to die because they believe this bullshit because they're not evacuating. Militias were setting up their own checkpoints looking for Antifa, stopping people at gunpoint, which was slowing down the evacuations. This one couple, they lived in Portland. He's a videographer who'd been covering a lot of the protests, but she lived in a suburb. She's from a suburb, so they went out to take pictures of the fires because they're journalists and they just like taking pictures and they want to see what's going on in their hometown. So they had gas masks and they're wearing the flak jackets to say press. They had gas masks in the protest. When people saw them in the gas masks, assumed they must be Antifa planning to start fires. So they found out that people thought they were Antifa when this girl was scrolling through her phone book on Facebook on the drive back to Portland, and saw her own license plate being circulated by the people she went to high school with, saying that her and her boyfriend were Antifa and to shoot them on sight. They were trying to track them down to execute them. Everything's going insane. This is really bad. And I don't know what people are going to do about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I brought this up before, and it's probably like it's overly simplistic and reductionist or whatever. I admit that, but it's weird to me that like that the overarching opinion of those of us on the left is that we are like limp-wristed, weak-willed, overly sensitive pussies, right? Like we're overly sensitive snowflakes who can't get anything done. But yet at the same time, we're behind this like underground black ops, like large spanning covert liberal operation that includes like murder and bombing and terrorist attack and all these like high level like operations. How does any of that make any sense? Like basically I'm just like, it's funny to me like that they watch like that on Fox News they play footage from like Chaz when that was the thing, downtown Seattle or whatever. They're playing footage from it where it's like a dude in a banana suit smoking a joint and twirling a baton, and they're playing it with like Terminator music, like the enemy grows stronger every day. Like, how the fuck? I cannot wrap my mind around the mental gymnastics required to believe both of those things at the same time. It's fucking insane to me.
But that's always the fascist jig, though, is that we can't let the left take power because they're so weak and corrupt they'll weaken our nation. But also they're so strong and secretly influential that you need to empower us to kill them. It was like it's why the liberals and conservatives ally with the Nazis to crush the communists in Germany. It's like you're watching Trump will do it here in simultaneous press and be like, oh, they're too weak. They won't defend America. Also, they're in the streets murdering all these people. It's
right. No, I mean, I guess you're right. It's like, I mean, that's essentially the same dynamic that the Nazis had for the Jews and whatnot, right? Like that, they were like vermin or whatever, but also that they
all powerful.
Also all powerful. I mean, yeah, you're right. That's always been their MO, but it makes no fucking sense. So, but none of that shit does.
Yeah.
So anyway,
these are things we can measure. I was reading this thing the other day about what to expect in the coming decade or so, and we probably are on the verge of a time that does have left-wing terrorism. It's probably going to happen. It's not happening right now. It's just not. Like we had the shitty thing that happened the other day in LA where somebody walked up on two cops and shot them. And I hope those people recover. One of them's a mom. No one should be shooting random people. The whole point of Black Lives Matter is that less people should be shot. It's like that's in general, that's what should happen is less people should die and less people should be shot. Let's say nobody should be shot. But those are the first two, like the guy in Portland, he didn't declare himself a member of Antifa, but he said he was there doing security for the protest. So if you want to hang that body on Antifa, the guy that killed the Proud Boy in Portland, okay, that's the first body connected to anybody associated with that would call themselves Antifa. Right-wing terrorism is constant in this country. It's just constant. It happens all the time. And something like 90%, the data came out last year, 90% of terrorist deaths last year were due to right-wing domestic terrorism. And they do these categories really weird because they put Islamic terrorism as a separate category, which is weird to me because that's also right-wing terrorism. But we can have that debate another time. It just, I don't know. It's a bizarre time to be alive, and we need to figure out a way to talk about this intelligently without taking blame for it and conceding that it's wrong. Because when left wingers start blowing up, military recruiting stations and post offices in 5 years, we need to be able to say that's wrong, but also argue against the people that are oppressing them.
Yeah, you're right, and this is a weird segue, but happy birthday, Mark. We're gonna go to the. We're gonna go to the comments over here and see what y'all are saying. But in the meantime, I want to make sure and say it is Smart Mark. He's still Smart Mark. It's Smart Mark's birthday today. How about that?
Thanks, Trey. I'm 40. My wife just she brought me a some sort of birthday tequila cocktail a few seconds ago, which I have to try.
She gave you a big ass bottle of whiskey for your birthday.
Yeah, I got a bottle of Bullet about the size of my leg. So that's going to be my thing. And also, what I'm doing for my birthday is in a couple of weeks. The American Cancer Society is really important to my wife because she's comes from a family of breast cancer survivors and not survivors, and they couldn't do Relay for Life this year because of COVID. So what she suggested is her idea to do an actual relay where people are spread out and you walk 27 miles, and she wouldn't do that alone. So I'm walking 27 miles a week from Saturday. To raise. So anyway, if you want to throw $5 to your American Cancer Society, that'd be awesome. That's all I was going to say. I want to send some love to my Aunt Linda, whose mom passed away a couple days ago.
Cheers. All love to Aunt Linda.
Yep.
All right. So Elisa Maria Holt says, do you think the Lincoln Project is actually helping? Their ads are pretty ruthless, and I know we've brought them up on the show before, but I like my basic thing on it is I don't know about their actual reasonings or rationales that they have, or how solid those are, but I still am glad that something like that exists right now in this moment, like a Republican source that's going after Trump or whatever. Although I don't know how much Republicans are even sharing their shit, but still.
I remember talking to I've made a lot of my living working on political talk shows, and we're talking to a buddy of mine who used to work on the Daily Show. It was talking about how little he thought that Jon Stewart's impact on the election was. And this is going to make sense in a second, I promise. But he was saying that satire never has any effect, and roasting people doesn't really do anything because it doesn't persuade anybody. And my thing was like, what Stewart was good at was shaming media figures because they watched the show. It wasn't like he was persuading conservative voters. But what he would do was they would do stuff roasting Bill O'Reilly, and he would feel the need to do a segment responding to it to show he was in fact being responsible, and it would constrain these people, and it would make their practices on their talk shows more responsible. I mean, for God's sakes, Stewart got Tucker Crossfire canceled when he went on there and roasted Tucker Carlson. So his impact was in I think he altered media coverage by making fun of them. Now, to the extent Lincoln Project is doing anything, I think they're probably, because people inside the Beltway watch those videos, they're changing the tenor of campaign coverage a little bit by expanding the parameters by which you can criticize Trump. So it's probably it's getting airplay on CNN, it's getting airplay on MSNBC. It makes Trump tweet about it, which means Fox has to talk about it. So I think that's the degree to which they're affecting stuff. I don't know if they're going to change an actual voter's mind, except for second degree effects through that stuff. If that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I agree with everything you just said, but I also like I already said, I just appreciate the fact that things like that exist now. So, John H. Player said, so what do we do in 2024 when we get the DA Kamala as the option compared to a progressive? I'm not voting Biden. I'm not for Biden. I'm just against Trump. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that last thing is the thing that matters the most to me right now. As long as you're on that, you're in that column of liberals, meaning you will still vote for Biden because you are that much against Trump, then me and you are on the same page, because I also would prefer a much more progressive candidate. As far as what happens in 2024 when, well, first of all, the assumption there is that Biden will be a one-term president, which I know there's been a lot of speculation on that, and it'll go right to Kamala or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to give a shitty answer to the question, but I'm not as worried about 2024 right now as I am about 2020.
Yeah.
We'll fucking set that bridge on fire when we get to it, as far as I'm concerned. And it is what it is, man. Like, for right now.
What I've reconciled myself to is America is a right of center country politically among its populace, and it's a very right of center country government wise, even more so than the voters, for a lot of different reasons. And we've never actually had a left wing president outside of FDR, who still rounded up Japanese people. So I don't really know what to. I mean, it's just like, we'll get them next time, man. I don't know what to tell you, but like, yeah. it's just we got to convince more people to think. Again, bring this up as 70% of people are for Medicare for all, and we can't get it. So that goes back to we're going to have left wing terrorism because doesn't matter what you vote for anymore. People get frustrated. But anyway, like, things, I can't imagine government getting worse than it is right now. And they're also like, there's a lot of inspiring grassroots stuff happening in lower levels. Like, there's a bunch of positive happenings in congressional campaigns and Senate campaigns, and get involved there. They'll drag Kamala to the left when she's president, hopefully.
Right. So, and I'm going to butcher this name. I apologize. Sahira Daqua says, I think the Lincoln Project is aiming for, quote, centrist, parentheses, whatever those are at this point. And, I mean, I know what you mean, because they talk a lot about, like, swing states and people that are on the fence and swing voters and undecided and all that type of shit. And like, I cannot picture in my head the person who fits that definition this year, given everything that's going on. I know they do exist, but it's just crazy to me. Like, how do you operate as a centrist, an independent, a swing voter, whatever you want to call it, in 2020 with all the shit that's going on?
I mean, I think it's like there's something to be said for firing up people who are already going to do stuff, but maybe not on the fence. So if you're like a moderate Republican, like for whatever reason, Democrats are going to make a lot of like ads with their name on it, calling Trump an out and out traitor, right? Lincoln Project will. So that might fire up some, people who aren't motivated to vote. I don't think it's going to be a lot. Again, I think it just changes the definition. It changes the bounds of the debate a little bit on those cable talk shows. That's it. Because they have to talk about the ad. They have to talk because those ads go viral among the people who are on those shows. So,
okay,
I think it's a bank shot if it's doing anything.
But like Lincoln Project aside, like what is a swing voter? What is somebody on the fence right now, in your opinion? What are they waiting to see? What are the factors they're weighing in their head right now?
Real life voters aren't like real life swing voters, especially. I mean, voters in general don't have like issue profiles that make sense, right? So like, an actual voter is like, I want Medicare for my daughter. I love guns. I want Super Bowl to kick off at 3 p.m. instead of 7, and I want and it should be black all content should be 0.10 to drive, and it's a random grab bag of shit, and then whatever they choose to emphasize when they walk into the voting booth is different, right? It doesn't make sense, so you can't really try to come up with a coherent worldview to pitch to swing voters. Seems like a lost cause to me. That's why it's all about messaging and turnout, and kitchen table issues. Why Democrats always want to talk about healthcare, because it's the one thing they know everyone cares about. If you can get to be the number one issue over guns or immigration or whatever, then you win the election.
All right. Tig Rahaf says, "Do you think we'll ever see a real third party since these two aren't working together?" I wish we had a multi-party system in this country. I've wished that for a long time. I think that would be preferable. As far as the reality of that actually happening, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'm pessimistic, at least in the near term. I think that would be great if that came to be at some point down the road, but we're just so entrenched in the system and also so like polarized and divided along the lines that we currently have, it's hard for me to imagine it. I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I mean, we arrived at two parties through a natural sort of selection process because the system of government sort of makes it that way. There are like two independents in all of Congress, maybe. You got Bernie, right, and then somebody in the House. I can't even remember right now. So I don't. It just like it just is two parties because it's always going to be two parties. Now, whether the two parties are going to be Democrats and Republicans is different. We kind of have a viable third party right now, and it's QAnon. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, the Tea Party, right? Which obviously not a fan of, but like when that first came up and became a thing, it got a lot of action, and I really hated it the entire time. And I remember at the time I was just like a baby comic working my day job in Oak Ridge, Tennessee or whatever, and I found a flyer on the ground one morning for the Coffee Party, because the Tea Party was huge at that moment, and the Coffee Party, according to this flyer, and I never heard shit else about it, was like basically the exact opposite of the Tea Party, meaning it was like a super progressive leftist party, branching off from big Democrat on the left or whatever. And again, I saw one flyer about it and nothing else after it. But I remember at that time, Tea Party had become a thing. I'm looking at this flyer for the Coffee Party, and I remember thinking, like, I think this would be good if we had a multitude of these things. And I was very worried about the Tea Party, but, like, and now the Republican Party is just basically, but, like,
Yeah.
What is it? 6-8 years later, we're back to just the two, and they've just been the right has been drugged farther to the right, and it just seems like that's sort of how it works with our system. They just sort of
I mean, I would say that
assimilate.
the Tea Party totally won and it took over the Republican Party is what
Right.
happened.
Right. But at the end of the day, two parties.
Yeah, that's why like the most effective way is to like you work within a political party who you broadly agree with at least their larger goals, and like AOC and the squad or whatever, and you try to like work. You start an insurgency from within.
Yep. All right. Well, the revolution will not be televised. All right. Well, that's it. We're out of
But
time.
it will be Facebooked, Trey.
Yes, and Twittered and all of that. And
Restream.
We'll be there. We'll be there every Tuesday and Thursday. And with that, that's it for this edition of Evening Skews. We'll see you in 48 hours back here, same time, same place, same channel, same people. I'm Trey. That's Mark.